The sun dipped below the horizon, and she found herself sitting on a park bench, staring at nothing. She had nowhere to go, no plan, nothing left. Then the ground rumbled. At first, she thought it was her imagination. But then the air vibrated, a deep, thrumming sound echoing through the city. People around her stopped, looking up. Evelyn followed their gaze, and her breath caught. 4 massive starships hovered in the sky, their sleek forms blocking out the stars. They weren't like any human ships she had ever seen. They were too advanced, too alien. A voice, deep and commanding, echoed from the sky, broadcasted across the entire city. "We have come for the one who saved our prince." Gasps and whispers spread through the crowd. People turned, looking for someone. Then, all at once, every eye landed on Evelyn. She froze. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear her own breath. The dragon, the one she had saved, it wasn't just any creature. It was royalty. And now, the entire world knew. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as the city around her fell into stunned silence. The massive starships hung in the sky like silent giants, their metallic hulls gleaming under the moonlight. People whispered in hushed, fearful tones, unsure of what was happening. The voice that had thundered across the city had been unmistakable. Whoever these beings were, they had come for her. Panic swelled in her chest. She wanted to run, but where? There was nowhere to hide from something that could blot out the sky. Then the silence broke as the first soldier descended. A beam of golden light shot down from one of the ships, forming a shimmering platform in the center of the street. A figure stepped forward, tall and imposing. His armor was sleek, deep crimson with golden accents, fitting him like a second skin. His eyes, slitted like a predator's, locked onto her with an intensity that made her blood run cold. More followed. 5, 10, 20 heavily armed warriors, each carrying weapons unlike anything Evelyn had ever seen. They moved with precise discipline, scanning the crowd, their eyes searching. Then the first warrior spoke, his voice smooth yet edged with authority. Evelyn Carter. Her name, spoken with such certainty that there was no use denying it. Every single person in the street turned to look at her. Her pulse pounded. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Before she could even react, the soldiers stepped forward, moving in perfect unison, clearing a path toward her. The crowd backed away in fear, as if standing too close to her might bring trouble. Evelyn took a slow step backward, but one of the warriors raised a hand. "Do not run," he said, his tone softer now. "You are under the protection of the Drakthal Dominion." Drakthal. The name sent a chill through her. She had heard rumors, whispers about an empire that ruled entire star systems with unmatched power. Humanity had never seen them in person, but their reputation was enough to keep Earth's governments cautious. They were warriors, conquerors, rulers, and she had saved their prince. A shadow moved above them, and Evelyn gasped as something massive descended from the ship, wings as black as night, golden eyes burning like fire. It was the dragon she had saved. Only now, he wasn't broken or weak. He was powerful, whole, and terrifying. Gasps and screams erupted from the crowd as the dragon landed gracefully behind the soldiers, his eyes locking onto hers. Then, to her complete shock, he spoke. "You saved my life, and your people cast you aside for it," he said, his voice deep, filled with something almost sorrowful. That was a mistake. Evelyn couldn't breathe. The creature she had nursed back to health. He could talk. But more than that, his words carried weight, a promise of something far beyond her understanding. The lead soldier stepped aside and gestured toward the glowing platform. "Prince Cyrax has claimed you as an honored guest. You are to come with us." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Some people looked at her in awe, others in fear, but one voice, loud and angry, cut through the tension. "She's a traitor." Evelyn turned just in time to see a man in military uniform pushing through the crowd. His insignia marked him as part of Earth's defense forces. His glare was filled with pure hatred. She aided an unknown alien without permission, he spat. She broke international security laws. We have orders to take her into custody. He raised his hand, signaling to someone behind him. A second later, soldiers in human military armor emerged from the street, rifles raised. The Drakthal warriors didn't move. They didn't even flinch at the weapons aimed at them. Instead, the lead warrior, who was easily a foot taller than the human commander, took a single step forward. "You dare threaten one under our protection?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying the weight of a storm. "She is a human citizen," the commander snapped. "She belongs to us." The warrior's golden eyes narrowed. "She saved our prince. She belongs to no one." The tension in the air thickened. Evelyn could feel the weight of every gaze on her. Two forces stood at odds, one demanding her surrender, the other ready to fight for her. Her heart pounded. This was spiraling out of control. Before she could think, before she could even take a step, the prince moved. One moment, he was still. The next, he lunged forward, and the human soldiers barely had time to react before the air itself seemed to crackle with power. The Earth commander shouted a warning, but it was too late. The prince's wings unfurled, and a deep guttural growl rumbled from his chest. "You cast her out," he snarled. "Now you will see what it means to betray the Drakthal." The ground shook. The golden platform flared to life, and before anyone could stop it, Evelyn felt the pull of energy surround her. Then, in the blink of an eye, she was gone, vanishing into the sky, leaving Earth behind. Evelyn's breath came in short gasps as the blinding light faded. The sensation of being lifted from the ground, weightless and powerless, still sent tremors through her body. But now, as her vision adjusted, she realized she was no longer on Earth. The floor beneath her feet was smooth and reflective, made of some dark metal that gleamed under soft golden lights. The air smelled different, crisper, cleaner, laced with something faintly sweet. The space around her was vast, towering walls curving seamlessly into the high ceiling. She was inside one of the starships. Evelyn turned sharply, expecting to see guards, but the sight before her stole the breath from her lungs. Prince Hatirax stood only a few feet away. No longer the broken creature she had found in the woods, no longer struggling to breathe, no longer weak. He was whole, his scales polished obsidian with veins of shimmering gold. His wings, once battered and torn, spread partially, casting deep shadows across the floor. But it was his eyes, those burning golden orbs, that locked onto her with something unreadable. She barely had time to react before the towering warrior who had spoken on the surface stepped forward. His armor gleamed under the ship's light, his expression firm but calm. "You are safe now," he said. "Earth has no claim over you." Safe. The word echoed in her mind, but she wasn't sure she believed it. She had been taken, no, rescued, from her home, away from everything she had ever known. Her hands clenched at her sides. "I never asked for this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The warrior inclined his head slightly. "No, but it is what you deserve." Before she could respond, Hatirax moved closer. Despite his massive form, his steps were eerily silent. He lowered his head, bringing his face level with hers. "You saved my life," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate in the air. "You had no reason to, yet you did. And for that, your own kind turned against you." Evelyn swallowed hard. I just did what was right." Hatirax studied her for a moment before exhaling, his breath warm against her skin. "Then you are rare among your people." The warrior beside him stiffened slightly but said nothing. Evelyn didn't know what to say. There had never been a moment where she regretted saving him, even after losing her job. But now, standing in the heart of an alien warship, she realized just how much that single act had changed her life. Hatirax straightened. "You do not yet understand the weight of your actions," he said, "but you will." The ship gave a soft hum, and suddenly, the walls around them flickered, turning transparent. Evelyn gasped as the sight outside was revealed. She was in space. Earth hung below them, a blue and green sphere bathed in sunlight, beautiful and distant. But her gaze was quickly drawn to the other ships surrounding them. There weren't just 4 luxury vessels. There were dozens of warships, their dark hulls lined with glowing symbols, their sheer size enough to make Earth's orbital defenses look laughable in comparison. Her stomach twisted. What is all this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Virax's gaze never left the planet below. "A message," he said, "to your leaders." Evelyn's blood ran cold. "A message," the warrior beside him spoke. "The Drakthal do not tolerate betrayal," he said simply. "They will learn this now." She turned to Xyrax, panic rising in her chest. You can't be serious. I mean, I lost my job, yes, but this, are you saying you're going to war with Earth?" Xyrax's tail flicked behind him, but his expression remained unreadable. "That depends on them," he said, "but I will not let their insult go unanswered." Evelyn felt dizzy. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. She had thought they were saving her from her own people's anger, not preparing to make Earth their enemy. "I don't want anyone to get hurt," she said, her voice unsteady. Vihara finally looked at her again, his golden eyes sharp. "Neither do I," he admitted, "but there are consequences for dishonor. Your people do not realize the kindness I show by only bringing warships as a warning." Only a warning. The word sent a shiver down her spine. Then, as if summoned by the weight of the conversation, a new voice crackled through the air. The ship's communication system flared to life. "Incoming transmission," an automated voice announced. A flicker of light appeared before them, forming a shimmering screen in the air. And there, staring back at them, was the face of Earth's highest authority, Chancellor Adam Greaves. His usually composed expression was tight with unease. "Drakthal vessel," he said slowly. "State your intentions." Xyrax stepped forward, his presence dominating the room. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the power beneath it. "You exiled a healer for showing compassion," he said. "You declared her actions a crime. I want to know." His golden eyes burned into the Chancellor's soul. "Does your planet stand by that decision?" The silence that followed was thick with unspoken threats. Evelyn held her breath, knowing that whatever came next would change the course of history forever. Evelyn stood frozen as the tension in the air grew unbearable. On the screen, Chancellor Adam Greaves' face remained unreadable, but the flicker of unease in his eyes betrayed him. He knew exactly what was at stake. The silence stretched long enough that Evelyn felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Then, finally, the Chancellor exhaled and straightened in his seat. "Earth does not bow to threats," he said. Xyrax didn't react immediately. His golden eyes remained locked on the Chancellor, unblinking, unreadable. The other Drakthal warriors around him remained motionless as well. Evelyn swallowed hard. She didn't know what she had expected from Earth's leader, but this was arrogance. This was madness. Xyrax finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying the weight of an entire species. "And yet," he said, "you showed no such strength when you cast her aside." The Chancellor's jaw tightened. "This is an internal matter. No foreign power has the right to interfere in our laws." Evelyn clenched her fists. "Foreign power." She burst out before she could stop herself. "You threw me away like I was nothing. You didn't even let me defend myself. And now, when someone actually cares about what happened, you suddenly remember the word rights." Greaves' gaze flickered to her, and for a split second, she saw something. Guilt, maybe. Or maybe just calculation. "You broke regulations, Miss Carter. You engaged with an unknown life form without clearance, exposed sensitive information, and put lives at risk." Xyrax let out a low, dangerous rumble. "You call saving a life a risk?" She was reckless. Graves shot back. Had she brought back a disease? A threat? We could not tolerate endangerment, no matter the intention. Evelyn shook her head in disbelief. That's what you tell yourself. That's how you justify it. The Chancellor's gaze hardened. This discussion is over. You will return Ms. Carter to Earth immediately. Silence. Adirax exhaled slowly, the golden veins along his scales glowing brighter for a moment. His tail curled behind him, a small but deliberate movement. Then he lifted his head. No. The Chancellor's expression barely changed, but Evelyn saw the brief flicker of shock in his eyes. No. Graves repeated, his voice quieter this time. Adirax took a step closer to the screen, his massive frame casting a long shadow. You believe yourself powerful because you stand behind words, he said, because you have built walls and convinced yourselves that the universe will obey them. But there are forces beyond your laws, beyond your control. The ship trembled slightly, not from weapons, not from any attack, but from the sheer presence of the fleet that hung over Earth like silent gods. Evelyn felt her stomach twist. This wasn't a game. This wasn't just politics. This was a test, a battle of wills between an empire that had ruled the stars for centuries and a planet that still believed itself untouchable. Greaves' face darkened. You would wage war over this. Tilted his head. Would you? The Chancellor hesitated. The tension between them was suffocating. Evelyn wanted to scream at them both, to make them see reason, but she knew better than to interrupt now. Then, without another word, the screen went black. The transmission had ended. The room remained deathly silent. Evelyn turned to Xyrax, her voice barely above a whisper. What happens now? Xyrax didn't look at her immediately. His gaze remained on the darkened screen, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long moment, he turned to the warrior standing beside him. Begin. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Wait, what do you mean begin? The warrior didn't hesitate. He pressed something on a control panel, and outside the ship, the entire fleet moved. The ships that had once held their position in silent warning were now shifting, their formations tightening, their presence no longer passive. Evelyn rushed forward. Xyrax, stop. Please, don't do this. Adirax finally looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that made her heart race. Not anger, not cruelty, but something far worse. Conviction. This is not just about you, Evelyn Carter, he said. This is about something far greater. She shook her head, panic rising in her chest. But you said you didn't want war. I do not. His voice was quiet, but firm. But Earth's leaders believe they can cast aside those who act with honor. That is a mistake they will learn to regret. The ship's engines hummed louder, and outside, the fleet's first movements began. Earth was about to face something it had never encountered before, and Evelyn had no idea how to stop it. The warships above Earth moved like silent shadows, positioning themselves with precision. The message was clear. The Drakthal were no longer asking. Evelyn's heart pounded as she turned to Xyrax, desperation in her voice. Please, you don't have to do this. Xyrax regarded her with calm, golden eyes. You misunderstand, Evelyn Carter. This is not about what I have to do. This is about what must be done. A warning siren blared from the control panels. One of the Drakthal officers turned to Xyrax. Earth's military is scrambling fighters. Their defense grid is powering up. Evelyn's breath hitched. They think you're invading. Xyrax remained unmoved. They can think what they wish. Evelyn shook her head and stepped forward, placing a hand on his armored chest. You said you wanted justice, not war. So talk to them. Give them a chance to do the right thing. For a moment, Xyrax simply studied her. Then, with a slow nod, he gestured to his officers. Send a transmission. One last opportunity. The ship's communication system activated, and within seconds, the image of Chancellor Greaves appeared again. This time, his expression was grim. "You've made your point," Graves said coldly. "Now stand down." Xyrax did not blink. "You will reinstate Evelyn Carter. You will publicly recognize her actions as honorable, and you will issue a formal apology." Greaves scoffed. "That is not how our world works." Xyrax tilted his head. "Then your world is broken." The Chancellor's lips pressed into a thin line. "Earth does not negotiate under threat." Xyrax exhaled slowly. "Then it is unfortunate that you view justice as a threat." Evelyn clenched her fists. "Graves, listen to me," she pleaded. "This isn't about just me anymore. They aren't going to attack, but they also won't just leave after what you did. You have to do the right thing." Greaves' gaze flickered with something unreadable. For a brief moment, Evelyn thought she saw hesitation, doubt. But then, his face hardened once more. "You betrayed Earth's protocols," he said. "You made your choice. And now we will make ours." The transmission cut out. A heavy silence fell over the command room. Xyrax's expression did not change. Slowly, he turned to his officers. "Disable their fleet." Evelyn's stomach dropped. No, wait. But the command had already been given. Outside, the Drakthal ships moved as one. Weapons systems activated, not to destroy, but to cripple. Energy pulses fired with precision, striking Earth's defense platforms and fighter squadrons. One by one, the planet's defenses went dark. Evelyn watched in stunned horror. The Drakthal had just rendered Earth's military powerless, without firing a single lethal shot. The realization settled like a stone in her chest. Earth was defenseless. And now, the real test would begin. Evelyn stood frozen, her breath shallow as the full weight of what had just happened sank in. Earth's mighty defense grid, its fleets, its proud military, had been shut down in minutes. No deaths, no destruction, just power stripped away like it was nothing. The control room was silent, save for the hum of the Drakthal warship systems. Every officer stood at attention, awaiting Xyrax's next move. Evelyn swallowed hard. "You've proven your point," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Earth can't fight you. So what happens now?" Xyrax regarded her calmly. "Now we give them their choice." With a simple gesture, one of his officers activated the communication link again. Within moments, Chancellor Greaves appeared on screen, his face pale but his expression tight with fury. "You think this is victory?" He spat. "You think we will bow to you?" Xyrax remained utterly still. "You misunderstand, Chancellor. We do not seek to rule your people. We seek justice." Greaves' jaw clenched. "You call this justice, stripping us of our ability to defend ourselves." Xyrax's golden eyes flickered with something unreadable. "You were never defending yourselves. You were defending your pride." A deep silence followed his words. Evelyn felt her heart hammering in her chest. Greaves was cornered, no weapons, no leverage, but she also knew men like him. He wouldn't surrender, not unless he saw another way out. She stepped forward, her voice urgent but measured. "Chancellor, listen to me. They didn't kill anyone. They didn't destroy anything. They could have, but they didn't. That means there's still a way out of this without war." Greaves' eyes flicked to her, filled with barely concealed anger. "You chose them over your own world." Evelyn's temper flared. "No, I chose what was right." She took a steadying breath. "And you can too. Publicly reinstate me. Acknowledge that I did the right thing." Greaves let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "You think the people of Earth will accept that? That they'll see a foreign power forcing us to admit fault and simply move on?" Xyrax's tail curled slightly. "Then do not do it for them. Do it for yourself." Greaves narrowed his eyes. "And what exactly does that mean?" Xyrax stepped closer to the screen, his voice low but carrying undeniable weight. Your people will discover what happened here. They will see the truth, whether you tell them or not. And when they do, you will not be remembered as a leader who stood strong." He paused. "You will be remembered as a man who let his own pride bring Earth to its knees." A flicker of something crossed Greaves' face. Uncertainty, doubt. Evelyn pressed forward. "You don't have to like it. But you know they're right." She exhaled. "Do the right thing. Not for me. For Earth." The Chancellor remained motionless. The silence stretched unbearably long. Then, finally, he inhaled sharply, shoulders tense as if carrying the weight of the entire planet. "What are your exact terms?" he asked through clenched teeth. Evelyn's heart leaped. Xerax simply nodded. "You will reinstate Evelyn Carter. You will acknowledge her actions as honorable. And you will ensure that no human who chooses to aid the Drakthal in the future will face punishment." Greaves looked away for a moment, eyes burning with silent fury. Then, with great reluctance, he muttered, "Fine." The screen cut out. Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her legs felt weak. It was over. She turned to Xerax, searching his face. "Is this really the end?" Xerax watched the dark screen for a long moment before speaking. "No," he said quietly. "This is just the beginning." The silence in the command room was thick with unspoken tension. Evelyn felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. The battle that never came, the war that was avoided, and the consequences of what had just unfolded. Xerax stood motionless, his golden eyes fixed on the dark screen where Greaves had been. The Drakthal had achieved what no other force in the galaxy had ever done. They had humbled Earth without firing a single lethal shot. Evelyn exhaled, her hands trembling slightly. "So, what happens now?" Xerax turned to her, his voice calm but firm. "Now, we watch." She frowned. "Watch for what?" His tail flicked, a sign of quiet calculation. "For the ripples." Evelyn's stomach twisted. She understood. Greaves had agreed, but not because he wanted to. His compliance had been forced, and men like him never forgot that. There would be consequences. Suddenly, a soft chime echoed through the ship's control room. One of the Drakthal officers turned to Xerax. "Transmission from Earth. Public broadcast." Xerax gestured, and the main screen flickered to life. Chancellor Greaves stood before the Earth's flag, his face like carved stone. The entire planet would be watching. His voice was steady, but there was a sharp edge beneath it. "Citizens of Earth, I address you today under unusual circumstances. As many of you have seen, our defense systems were disabled by the Drakthal without bloodshed. This was not an act of war, but a demand." He exhaled slowly. A demand for justice. Murmurs spread through the Drakthal officers, but Xerax simply listened. Greaves continued, his tone carefully measured. "Today, I acknowledge that Evelyn Carter acted with honor. She will be reinstated, and her actions in saving an innocent life will not be seen as treason, but as a mark of courage." He forced the next words out, clearly struggling with them. "Furthermore, Earth will ensure that no human who acts in accordance with their conscience, in the service of what is right, will face punishment for doing so." The words were there, but Evelyn could hear the unspoken resentment behind them. This was not an apology. This was a surrender masked as diplomacy. Then, Greaves' gaze darkened. "However, let this be clear. Earth's sovereignty remains intact. And while we may acknowledge the events of today, we will never forget that power alone does not determine the future. The human race will always rise." The transmission cut out. Evelyn felt her heart sink. The words were said, but the war was far from over. Xerax turned to her, his expression unreadable. "There will be resistance." She nodded, feeling the truth settle in her chest. "I know." A beat of silence passed between them. Then Xerax did something she never expected. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture of understanding. "You have done something great today, Evelyn Carter. But greatness always comes at a cost." She looked up at him. "And what if I'm not ready for that cost?" His golden eyes softened slightly. "Then you must decide if the path is still worth walking." Evelyn exhaled, staring at the dark screen where Greaves' image had been moments ago. There was no going back. She had changed everything. And now she would have to face what came next.